Hi there, I'm Dr. Helen Hsu from Stanford CAPS. I'm also the liaison to the Asian American Activity Center, ACUPC. As you all know, we've had to move all our workshops and services to remote because of COVID-19. And one of the workshops I was really looking forward to presenting this quarter was actually a space for us to meet for a few sessions and talk about family boundaries, obligations, how we navigate these really complicated relationships in our lives. And the reason I wanted to develop that workshop and space for us was because it comes up so often in so many people's sessions. So in lieu of actually getting to meet together this quarter, I at least wanted to make some videos where we could actually present some of the ideas, some FAQs, frequently asked questions that might be of interest, might be applicable, or some food for thought for yourself as you navigate boundaries in your personal relationships. And you could still follow up individually with CAPS. Also, well-being coaches are there, and just having a place to discuss some of this, even amongst yourselves. But really fundamentally, what are personal boundaries? And what that means for each person might feel a little different. But fundamentally, we're just talking about some kind of a dividing line, not literal, but that helps you to define your values, your identity, your relationships and sense of security, what to expect and what people can expect from you. And that can happen in relationships, whether that's work, family, friendships, romantic. And how do we actually assert what our boundaries are? Some of us were taught really explicitly in our families what was expected, but maybe those things have changed at a different place in your life. Some of us weren't really taught explicitly and actually have to really put some thought into self-awareness, like, how do I feel about this interaction? Where do I feel like I can give, and where do I feel like, this is my limit that I can give or on this boundary and still have self-respect or feel this is healthy? And how do we do it? Self-awareness, self-respect, and actually learning and practicing assertive communication skills, which not all of us really were taught in our families of origin. And even the concept of personal boundaries, for some people this might seem really obvious, and others not so much. I often sort of joke with people that coming from an immigrant Taiwan Chinese background, I didn't even know the words for personal boundary. I still kind of don't in my first language, but so the concept was not really something that we ever spent time talking about or learning about. And I wonder what that was like for your family. And maybe what is it like now in your workplace or with your friend group? So the key things I want you to think about in examining personal boundaries is, there were 5 points that I really think is important as a fundamental, is to think about boundaries as being healthful. That healthy boundaries means that none of the parties feel that they're being taken advantage of too much, nor do they feel suffocated by resentment or having been manipulated. And we're not practicing enabling. And enabling means that maybe in the short term, I help you out and you're happy with me, but I'm actually enabling you to act in a way that in the long run is less healthy and more of a problem. So maybe if you've heard the term enabling the most, people talk about it a lot, for example, with addiction, that sometimes we spare somebody the consequence of immediate problem that they may have due to their substance use, but then have we just allowed the substance use to continue and get worse? And so we're actually not helping them. We're enabling them in a way that in the long run is not healthful. So your boundaries should be healthful. They should also be cultural. As an Asian American and with a lot of students who are from communal cultures all around the world, sometimes there is a fear that when we talk about boundaries, we're going to be in a clinical setting or counseling setting, we're going to be really pushing some kind of Western idea about boundaries. And that's not our purpose at all. I think you have to set your own idea about where is my culturally acceptable boundary. This is defined by yourself, your values, your family of origin. There may be a lot of tension because a lot of us are bicultural or multicultural, multiple communities, we're intersectional, and not everyone in all of our communities agrees on what is a reasonable place to set a boundary. So that needs to take some time sometimes to explore. And for a lot of young adults, it's really difficult to figure out the balance if your family of origin really has very hierarchical boundaries, really expects a lot from you that's very traditional. And I always say that, you have to figure out where that fits with your own values, including that sometimes our home cultures will use cultural values to almost be manipulative, right? So, for example, it's not just that we're supposed to respect an elder no matter what, 100% of the time. Like, generally speaking, that's often a popular value in many cultures. But remember that the other part of that value is that elder is also supposed to be somebody who is worthy and wise and protective. And so if someone is sort of not fulfilling their cultural role, but really demanding that you do, there's a problem there maybe about how that's being implemented in that relationship, and it's worth looking at. So what does culture mean? It's not just one-dimensional. Boundaries should also be authentic. So this is the self-awareness part that will lead to better relationships. If you can't be authentic, if other people can't be authentic with you, that might save the peace in the short term, but it doesn't make for a better authentic relationship in the long term. So figuring out where that is in each of your interactions as well. Boundaries should be flexible, that they can vary. Being rigid in almost every situation is not real helpful. We all have to have room to be lifelong learners, to evolve, and it can be flexible. Maybe in this setting with this person, I can be pretty loose with my boundaries because I'm not worried that they're going to take advantage of me, and we have a very respectful relationship. But at another time or with another person, I know I really need to be very firm in that setting. So I can be flexible too in how I practice. And the next is that final thought is that your boundaries should be responsible. It's not a selfish thing to assert boundaries. As we said, it's about being healthy, protecting your values, and being responsible. If you have no boundaries, it's really hard to meet your priorities, and then you're really not going to know how to make sometimes difficult decisions. So taking that time, and some of us have a little extra free time right now with shelter in place, to really think about, where are my priorities and how does this help me make decisions? For example, if I say yes to everyone who asks a favor of me, again, in the short term, maybe I think they're happy and I feel a little bit better. But in the long term, am I really missing out on the things that I think are way more important to get done? And remember that just because somebody else may or may not be happy with you setting a boundary, that doesn't actually mean that maybe you were wrong to do it or not. You're responsible for being in tune with yourself, trying to be authentic, healthful, culturally appropriate, and flexible with how you set your boundaries. You're not responsible for how somebody else feels about it, right? There's a pretty popular meme going around right now about maybe the only people who are glad you don't have boundaries are the ones who benefit from you not having them. Not that everyone is out to take advantage of you, but there will definitely be those kind of people. Or there's just those who don't know when to stop pushing until you actually let them know. So that's kind of my really short, under 10 minutes FAQs about personal boundaries. It was kind of the intro for our boundaries and obligations discussion that was set for spring. And please feel free to follow up with CAPS to talk more about this. One book that I can recommend if you want to think about, well, how do I improve my assertiveness communication skills? We have no financial backing with this, but there is a workbook called the Assertiveness Workbook. It's by Randy J. Patterson, and it actually really walks you through looking at your communication style. Am I too passive? Am I really aggressive and rigid? Do I get passive aggressive? Like, how do I kind of refine it to be assertive, clear, candid, not needing to be super defensive, not needing to just always cave? So it's a good starting point if you have some time to devote to developing communication skills while you're sheltering in place. I definitely recommend using some of this time in spring with intention to choose a topic for yourself, for self-improvement and growth in areas that are not just academic. So this may be the first, but if we get more questions or things, there'll be more CAPS webinars. And so thanks for listening in about FAQs about personal boundaries, and definitely hope to see you next quarter.